The unexpected questionante story begins on a quiet Sunday morning. The sun had barely risen over Palo Alto, painting the sky with soft orange and pink. Sundar Pichai sat at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of tea he had hardly touched. For months he had carried a heavy silence in his heart. His wife, the love of his youth, had passed away unexpectedly 2 years ago. And though time had tried to dull the pain, it had never healed the wound completely. His son, Arjun, now 12 years old, had learned to mask his own grief with smiles, jokes, and endless questions about the world. Sundar admired his strength, yet he feared the boy often carried loneliness that words could not express. That morning Sundar whispered something, even he had not planned to say, "Arjun." His voice trembled. What if one day you had to choose a new mom? The boy froze, spoon in hand, milk dripping onto the table. His big eyes widened, filled with confusion. What do you mean, Papa? Mama is gone. No one can replace her. Sundar reached across the table and held his son's hand gently. I know, Beta. No one can replace her. But life sometimes asks us to open our hearts again. I don't want you to feel alone. I want you to feel the warmth of family. Arjun tilted his head, thinking deeply. Then, with a surprising seriousness for his age, so, you're asking me to choose? Sundar nodded slowly, and in that single nod, a storm began that neither father nor son could predict. The following week, Sundar invited 5 women into their lives. All of them kind, all accomplished in their own way, all chosen with care. But the choice would not be his, it would be Arjun's. The first was Mia, a brilliant scientist who spoke softly and loved books. The second, Layla, a teacher who worked with disabled children and carried laughter wherever she went. The third, Ananya, a famous chef whose food could melt any heart. The fourth, Rema, a successful businesswoman with confidence that filled every room. And the fifth, a quiet stranger named Kavya, who no one really knew well, but who carried an aura of mystery around her. Each woman had agreed to spend time with Sundar and Arjun, not as contestants in a strange contest, but as human beings seeking connection. On the very first evening, Arjun sat on the couch, legs folded, watching Maya read aloud from a book. Her voice was calm, and her eyes lit up as she explained every detail. Sundar watched his son lean forward with interest, and for the first time in years, he saw something like comfort in the boy's face. But then Layla entered the room with a guitar, singing an old Hindi song his mother used to sing. Arjun's eyes filled with tears. He whispered, "That sounds like Mama." Sundar's chest tightened up and cooked dinner that night, simple, dal and rice, just the way Arjun liked it. He ate quietly, not saying much, but afterward he asked for a second serving. Sundar noticed how the aroma of home had filled the kitchen. Again, Rima spoke less to Arjun and more to Sundar, her words sharp, her tone confident. She praised Arjun's intelligence, but her eyes seemed fixed on Sundar's position, his power, his influence. Sundar felt uneasy, though he said nothing. The last sat silently in the corner, barely speaking. But when Arjun dropped his spoon, she picked it up gently, wiped it, and said, "Be careful, little one." Something in her tone carried warmth, as if she saw him beyond his role as Sundar Pichai's son. That night, after everyone had gone, Arjun turned to his father. "Papa, this feels strange, like I'm betraying Mama." Sundar knelt beside him, his own eyes wet. "No, Beta. This is not betrayal. This is life teaching us that love can grow again without taking away what we had before. Your Mama will always be with us. But maybe, just maybe, another person can help us heal." Arjun nodded slowly. But then he said something that made Sundar's heart stop. "Papa, I already know who I want to choose, but you may not like it." The boy's secret choice of night after Sundar asked his son to choose. The house was unnervingly quiet. Sundar lay awake in his room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the city outside the window. Every thought he had circled back to the same thing. His son's words. I already know who I want to choose, but you may not like it. Those words had struck him harder than any boardroom confrontation, harder than any business setback. Sundar was a man used to solving problems, logically breaking down challenges into steps, measuring risks, finding strategies, but this was different. This was his son's heart. And hearts, he knew, followed rules no strategy could contain. He tossed and turned until dawn. Finally, he rose, dressed simply in jeans and a plain shirt, and went to the kitchen where Arjun was already sitting, legs curled up on the chair, pouring honey into his cereal. Beta, Sundar said gently, trying to mask the urgency in his voice. Yesterday you said something. You said you already know who you want to choose. Arjun looked up, spoon halfway to his mouth. He chewed slowly, swallowed, and for a moment his eyes seemed older than his 12 years. Yes, Papa, I know. Sundar pulled out a chair and sat across from him. Then tell me, who is it? Arjun didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, if I choose someone you don't like, will you still accept it? The question pierced Sundar's chest. He realized this wasn't just about remarriage, it was about trust, about whether his son's voice mattered in shaping their future. Sundar took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, Arjun. Your choice will be respected. I promise. The boy leaned forward, lowering his voice as if sharing a dangerous secret. It's not Maya, even though she's kind. It's not Layla either, even if she sings like Mama. It's not Ananya, even though her food feels like home. And it's not Rima. She scares me a little, Papa. He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. I choose Kavya. Sundar froze. Of all the women, Kavya was the one he understood the least. She was quiet, almost mysterious, with an air that made people unsure whether to trust her or avoid her. Sundar had only spoken to her briefly, and even then she had revealed very little about her life. She didn't boast about achievements like Rima. She didn't shine with joy like Layla. She didn't nurture like Maya, and she didn't fill rooms with warmth like Ananya. She was different, Kavya. Sundar repeated, almost to himself. Arjun nodded firmly. Yes, I want her. Sundar leaned back in his chair, silent. His mind raced. Why her? What does Arjun see in her that I don't? Finally, Sundar asked, why Kavya, Beta? What makes you trust her? Arjun lowered his spoon into the bowl, watching the milk ripple. Because she doesn't try too hard. Everyone else. They're nice, but it feels like they're showing something. Kavya is just real. When she looked at me, Papa, I didn't feel like a project or someone she had to impress. I felt safe. Safe. The word echoed in Sundar's mind. After losing his wife, he had tried to give Arjun safety and every way security. A stable home, protection. But maybe what his son longed for was emotional safety. The kind that came not from money or comfort, but from being seen and understood. Still, a knot of doubt tightened in Sundar's stomach. He couldn't help but feel uneasy. Kavya's silence hid something, and Sundar had learned long ago that silence was sometimes more dangerous than words. That evening, Sundar invited Kavya for tea. They sat in a garden, the late sun painting long shadows across the grass. She wore a simple blue kurta, her hair loosely tied, her hands resting calmly on her lap. Sundar studied her carefully. Kavya, he began, Arjun seems to like you. He says he feels safe with you. She smiled faintly. Arjun is a wise boy. He notices things others overlook. Her calmness unsettled him. Tell me, Kavya, what is your story? Why did you agree to meet us? She looked down at her hands, silent for a long moment, as though deciding whether to reveal a truth she had carried for years. Then she said softly, sometimes life brings us where we least expect. I didn't come here for you, Mr. Pichai. I came here because of him, Arjun. Sundar's breath caught. Because of him? Kavya nodded. He reminds me of someone I once loved dearly, someone I lost. She didn't say more, and Sundar didn't push. But that night, as he tucked Arjun into bed, Sundar's mind spun with unease. Who was Kavya really? What loss was she speaking of? Why did she seem to carry secrets in her eyes? The next day, things became more complicated. Layla visited again. With her guitar, and Arjun sang along with her this time, smiling widely. Maya gifted Arjun a book and told him she wanted to teach him how to build robots. Ananya brought sweets, making him laugh with flour on her face. Each woman showed genuine affection. And yet, despite all of this, Arjun's choice didn't waver. That evening, when Sundar asked again, Arjun said simply, "Papa, I still want Kavya." The boy's conviction shook Sundar. He decided to investigate Kavya further quietly, without telling Arjun. He reached out to an old friend who still lived in India, asking him to find whatever he could about her past. Days passed and Sundar balanced his life between work and this strange new chapter. Google board meetings felt easier to handle than the quiet storm brewing at home. But then one evening his friend called back with news. "Sundar," the voice said over the crackling line, "there is something you should know about Kavya. Her past is not what it seems." Before the friend could finish, Sundar heard Arjun calling from the other room. "Papa, come quickly." Sundar dropped the phone and ran, heart pounding. He found Arjun standing in the hallway, pale and shaken. "What is it, beta?" Sundar asked, his voice trembling. Arjun pointed to the front door, where an envelope lay on the floor, slid under the crack. Sundar bent down, picked it up, and tore it open. Inside was a single piece of paper with 6 words written in neat, careful handwriting. "Do not trust. Kavya. She lies." Sundar's hand shook. Arjun's eyes widened with fear. And in that silence, the world seemed to tilt. Asterisk, the letter of doubt. The letter lay between them like a silent bomb. Sundar's fingers trembled as he held it, the words cutting deeper than he wanted to admit. "Do not trust Kavya. She lies." Arjun's small hands gripped his father's arm, his voice shaky. "Papa, who would send this and why?" Sundar didn't answer. His mind churned, his heart battling with his thoughts. He had promised his son that his choice would be respected. Yet now shadows crept into the edges of that promise. Secrets, lies, the possibility that Kavya wasn't who she seemed. "Maybe it's a joke," Arjun whispered hopefully, though even as he said it, his face betrayed doubt. Sundar folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his pocket. "We won't jump to conclusions, beta. But we must be careful." That night, sleep escaped. Again. He walked quietly into his study, closed the door, and unfolded the letter once more. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, almost elegant. It was the handwriting of someone educated, someone who wanted to be taken seriously. But who? Maya? Layla? Ananya? Rima? Jealousy could breed such words. Or was it someone outside the circle, someone who knew more about Kavya than he did? At dawn, Sundar sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the rising sun. He remembered his wife's face, the way she used to smile when she held Arjun close, whispering, "Protect him, Sundar. Promise me you'll always protect him." That promise rang in his ears. And now here he was, torn between honoring his son's trust and shielding him from possible danger. The next day, Kavya came. She brought no gifts, no grand gestures. Only herself. She found Arjun in the garden, trying to fly a kite that kept crashing into the ground. Without a word, she took the string from his hand, adjusted the frame, and with a swift flick, sent the kite soaring into the sky. Arjun's laughter echoed across the yard, and Sundar stood at the window watching them. A voice in his head whispered, "Look at him. He is happy." But another voice, darker, replied, "Happiness can be a trap when it hides the truth." Later that evening, Sundar confronted her. They sat in the living room, the air thick with unspoken tension. "Kavya," he said firmly, "someone sent us a letter. It says you are not who you claim to be." "It says you lie?" Her expression didn't change. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. Instead, she placed her hands calmly on her lap and said softly, "Then maybe you should believe it." Sundar blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" She sighed, her eyes clouded with something between sorrow and resignation. "I never lied to Arjun. With him, I am myself. But yes, there are things about me you don't know. Things I never shared. Then tell me now, Sundar pressed, his voice rising despite his effort to stay calm. Tell me who you really are. She hesitated, her lips parting, but before she could speak, Arjun burst into the room holding the kite. Papa, did you see? It finally flew, the moment shattered. Kavya smiled gently at the boy, her secret slipping back into silence. Sundar's frustration grew. He couldn't push her in front of Arjun, not without risking his son's trust. But he also couldn't ignore the warning. 2 days later, another envelope appeared at the door. This time it contained not words, but a photograph. Sundar's blood ran cold as he stared at it. It showed Kavya standing outside a courthouse years ago, holding the hand of a little boy. The child's face was blurred, but the resemblance to Arjun was undeniable. The same eyes. The same tilt of the head dot written on the back were 4 chilling words. Ask her about him. That evening, Sundar called Kavya again. His hand shook as he held up the photo. Who is this child, Kavya? Why does he look like my son? Her face paled, but her voice remained steady. That's my son, she said quietly. He died. The room went silent. Arjun stood at the doorway, frozen, his young mind struggling to grasp the weight of what he had overheard. Your son? He whispered, his voice trembling. Kavya turned slowly toward him, tears pooling in her eyes. Yes, Arjun. I had a son. He was about your age. He's gone now? Arjun stepped forward, his face full of shock, but also something deeper compassion. Is that why you look at me like that? Like you already know me? Kavya nodded, her tears finally spilling. Because when I see you, I see the love I lost. And I don't want to lose again. Sundar's chest tightened painfully. There was truth in her voice, raw and unguarded. But still the shadows lingered. Who had sent those letters and photographs? Why did they want to destroy Kavya's presence in their lives? And was her story the whole truth or only part of it? That night, as the house grew quiet, Sundar sat alone at his desk, staring at the photo. Somewhere deep inside, he knew the storm had only begun. Suddenly his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. The words sent a chill down his spine. If you let Kavya stay, you will lose everything. Asterisk. The cracks in the truth. Message glowed on Sundar's phone screen, like a curse he couldn't shake. If you let Kavya stay, you will lose everything. The words sank deep into him, pressing him every fear he had as a father, as a leader, as a man who had already lost once before. For years, Sundar had faced countless threats, competitors trying to dismantle him, critics trying to humiliate him, challenges that demanded every ounce of his intelligence. But this felt different. This was not about business, not about money, not about global politics. This was about family, about his son's fragile heart, and about a woman who carried secrets that seemed to stretch into shadows he couldn't see. That night, Sundar paced the floor of his study. Every step echoed with conflict. Should he believe Kavya's confession about her son? Should he trust the raw tears he had seen in her eyes? Or should he heed the anonymous letters and messages that seemed determined to tear her away from them? His heart told him one thing. His mind told him another. And in the middle of that storm was Arjun, innocent, hopeful, already attached. The next morning, Sundar tried to act normal. He prepared breakfast, asked Arjun about his school project, even cracked a small joke that made the boy laugh. But inside, he was restless. The weight of the photo and the message gnawed at him like a poison he couldn't spit out. Later that day, Maya visited again. She had brought Arjun a small science kit, eager to show him how to build a miniature rocket. Sundar watched them from a distance, trying to focus, but his thoughts slipped. When Maya saw the tension on his face, she approached quietly. You're troubled, Sundar, she said gently. What is it? He shook his head. It's nothing. But Maya's sharp eyes studied him. She placed a hand on his arm and whispered, Be careful who you let close. Not everyone is what they seem. The words echoed the warning from the letters. Sundar's unease grew. Was Maya hinting at something she knew? Or was she simply feeding suspicion? By evening, Kavya came again. Arjun ran to her excitedly, pulling her hand, showing her the rocket he and Maya had made. Sundar noticed how naturally Kavya bent down, how tenderly she listened, how patient her voice was. There was no performance, no exaggeration, only quiet. Presence. Later, when Arjun went to bed, Sundar sat across from her in the dimly lit living room. The air was heavy, both of them knowing unspoken things lay between them. Kavya, Sundar said finally, his tone firm but not unkind. I need to know the truth. These letters, these photos, these messages, they're tearing my family apart. I can't allow lies to live under my roof. If you care about Arjun, if you care about what you've built here, then tell me everything. For the first time, Kavya's calm broke. Her hands trembled, her lips pressed tight as though holding back a flood. Then she spoke, her voice low, almost shaking. I was married once, she began. My husband was kind at first, then cruel. I stayed for the sake of my son. But one night a fire consumed everything. I barely escaped. My boy, he didn't. Her voice cracked and tears slid down her face. Sundar's chest ached as he listened, but she continued. After that, I left everything behind. The city, the people who judged me, even my own name for a while. I carried guilt like a stone on my back. I blamed myself for surviving when he did not. When I saw Arjun, it was like the universe gave me a second chance. Not to replace my son, never that, but to protect and love someone the way I couldn't save him. Sundar's eyes burned. The sincerity in her pain was undeniable, and yet he could not ignore the warnings. He leaned forward, searching her face. Then who is sending these letters? Who wants to keep you away from us? Kavya shook her head, slowly. I don't know. But someone doesn't want me here. Just as silence fell, the doorbell rang. Sundar stood, uneasy. When he opened the door, he froze. Standing, there was Rima, the confident businesswoman who always seemed to calculate her every move. Her smile was tight, her eyes sharp. Sarja dropped by unannounced. She said smoothly, but I thought you should know the truth about Kavya. Sundar stiffened. What truth? Rima stepped inside, her heels clicking against the floor, her voice dripping with authority. Kavya isn't who she says she is. She's not just a grieving mother. She has debts, Sundar. She was once involved in a scandal back in India. I have proof. She pulled out her phone, scrolling quickly before shoving it toward him. On the screen was an article from years ago. Woman accused in fraud case, missing after court hearing. The photo was blurry, but the resemblance to Kavya was striking. Sundar's world tilted. He turned to Kavya, his heart pounding. Is this true? Kavya's face went pale. She didn't deny it. Arjun, who had crept out of his room at the sound of voices, stood at the top of the stairs, watching. His young voice cracked through the tension. Papa, what's happening? Why are they saying this about Kavya? Sundar looked up at his son, torn apart inside. Go back to bed, Arjun. We'll talk in the morning. But Arjun shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. No, I don't care what anyone says. I trust her. His words struck like lightning, echoing through the house. Sundar looked from his son to Kavya, then back at Rima. His chest felt as if it might shatter from the weight of it all. And then Kavya, her voice trembling but steady enough to cut through the chaos, whispered, Sundar, if you really want the truth, meet me tomorrow, alone. I will tell you everything I've hidden. But you may never forgive me after. Asterisk, the truth in shadows next morning arrived heavy with silence. Sundar woke earlier than usual, the weight of Kavya's words from the night before pressing down on his chest. Meet me tomorrow, alone. I will tell you everything I've hidden. But you may never forgive me after. Those words haunted him, like a storm cloud, filling every corner of his thoughts. He walked into the kitchen where Arjun sat quietly, eating cereal, his eyes swollen from tears shed in the night. Sundar tried to smile, but the boy looked up and spoke softly. You're going to see her today, aren't you? Sundar nodded slowly. Yes, Beta. I need to hear what she has to say. Arjun's spoon clinked against the bowl as he put it down. Don't judge her too fast, Papa. Sometimes people hide things, not because they are bad, but because they are scared. Those words, spoken with such innocent wisdom, pierced Sundar. He leaned down, kissed his son's head, and whispered, "I will remember that." Later that afternoon, Sundar drove to the place Kavya had chosen, a quiet cafe on the edge of the city, far from the polished boardrooms and noisy streets. She was already there, sitting at a corner table, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of tea. She hadn't touched. Her eyes lifted when he entered, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Finally, Sundar sat across from her. His voice was calm but firm. "You said you would tell me everything." "I'm listening." Kavya's hand shook slightly as she sat. The cup down. "I told you about my son. That part was true. He died in the fire. But what I didn't tell you was what happened before." She drew in a long breath. "After my husband turned cruel, I tried to leave him. But he controlled everything: money, reputation, even my freedom. He forced me into signing papers for a company I didn't understand. When the fraud case came, it was my name on the documents, not his. I became the scapegoat. The courts dragged me through humiliation, newspapers painted me as a liar, and when I tried to defend myself, no one listened. Then the fire came, and when I lost my son, I lost the will to fight. I disappeared. That's why the world thinks I am guilty. But I never stole anything." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. "For years, I lived in silence, working quietly, staying out of sight. I carried shame for something I didn't do. When I saw Arjun, it was like fate was punishing me and healing me at the same time. Punishing me because I remembered my son every time I looked at him. Healing me because he made me believe I could still love, still protect, still give something of myself without fear." Sundar listened in silence, his face unreadable, his mind raced with questions. Could she be telling the truth? Or was this another carefully woven story? He wanted to trust her. He wanted to believe that the pain in her eyes was real. But the warnings in the letters, the photo, the message on his phone, they clawed at him like thorns, refusing to let go. "Why didn't you tell me all of this before?" Sundar asked finally, his voice sharper than he intended. Kavya flinched, but met his gaze, because people see what they want to see. They see my past, and they decide I am guilty. I was afraid you would do the same. I didn't want to lose Arjun's trust before I had the chance to show him who I truly am. Her words echoed in Sundar's chest, heavy with truth yet tangled in fear. Before he could reply, his phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. "She lies even now. Meet me tonight if you want proof." Attached was a address. Sundar's blood ran cold. He looked up at Kavya, who sat waiting, unaware of the message he had just received. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, his heart pounding. "I need time to think," he said finally, rising from his chair. "Thank you for telling me." Kavya's eyes softened, though sorrow lingered in them. "Whatever you decide, Sundar, just know I never came here to hurt you. I came here because Arjun saw something in me I thought was gone forever." Sundar left the cafe with his mind torn apart. On one side, Kavya's confession, raw and painful, filled with loss. On the other, the anonymous messages, urgent and insistent, painting her as a liar. That evening, after dinner, Arjun tugged at his father's sleeve. "Papa, did she tell you the truth?" Sundar hesitated, then answered softly. "She told me." "Her truth." Arjun frowned, not satisfied. "Sometimes grown-ups make things too complicated." "I don't need her to be perfect, Papa. I just need her to care." Sundar's throat tightened. His son's words were like a mirror showing him what mattered most. But when Arjun fell asleep, Sundar slipped quietly out of the house. He drove alone through the dark streets to the address from the message. It was a abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, the kind of place no one visited unless they had something to hide. His pulse quickened as he stepped inside Dot in the dim light. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was Maya, the gentle scientist who had once read stories to Arjun. But her face now was hard, her eyes sharp. "You shouldn't trust Kavya," she said coldly. "She destroyed lives back in India. She will destroy yours too. I warned you before. Now I'm showing you proof." She handed him a folder. Inside were documents, bank transfers, court records, testimonies. Each one seemed to tie Kavya's name to crimes of fraud, betrayal, and ruin. Sundar's hands shook as he flipped through them, his heart sinking deeper with every page. But then, at the bottom of the pile, he found something strange in email. Addressed not to Kavya, but to Maya herself. It was from the same law firm that had handled the case. It thanked her for settling debts after her husband's business scandal. Sundar looked up slowly, his eyes narrowing. Why do these papers have your name on them, Maya? Maya's face tightened, a flicker of panic flashing in her eyes before she masked it. Don't twist things, Sundar. Kavya dragged me into that mess too. I was another victim. But Sundar had spent years reading faces, weighing truths, and in that moment, he saw fear. Maya was hiding something before he could press further. A sound came from the warehouse door. Sundar turned sharply and froze. Standing there in the dim light was Arjun, his small frame trembling. Papa. His voice cracked, filled with betrayal. You said you would listen to me. You said you would trust me. But you came here behind my back. Sundar's heart shattered. The final choice of the warehouse air was thick. Dust floating in beams of dim light as silence wrapped around them. Sundar stood frozen, his son's trembling voice cutting deeper than any blade. You said you would listen to me. You said you would trust me, but you came here behind my back. Arjun's eyes glistened with betrayal, his small fists clenched, as though holding together a world that was falling apart. Sundar's lips parted, but no words came. He had faced leaders, governments, and global crises, but he had never felt as powerless as he did standing in front of his son's wounded heart. Arjun, Sundar whispered, stepping closer. I was only trying to protect you. But the boy stepped back, his voice breaking. Protect me from what? From the only person who makes me feel like Mama is still here? You don't understand, Papa. I don't care about the past. I care about now, and right now I trust Kavya. Words shook the room, silencing even Maya, who stood stiffly by the crates, her face caught between fear and fury. Sundar turned slowly toward her, his eyes narrowing. Mia, these documents, they show Kavya's name, yes. But they show yours too. Why? Maya's mask cracked. Her voice sharpened, rising with desperation. Because I cleaned up her mess. Because when her lies collapsed, I was left to pick up the pieces. But Sundar's instincts told him otherwise. He had built his life on reading truths hidden in silences. And Maya's voice carried more fear than anger. No, he said firmly. This isn't about Kavya. This is about you. You were the one involved in that scandal, weren't you? Maya's face twisted, and for the first time, the confident scientist looked cornered. She was supposed to take the blame. It was the deal. No one was supposed to dig this deep. The confession slipped like poison from her lips, and the room seemed to collapse around them. Arjun gasped. Sundar's jaw tightened. The letters, the warnings, the fear, they hadn't come from some mysterious stranger trying to protect him. They had come from Maya, desperate to bury her own sins, desperate to destroy Kavya before the truth surfaced. You let everyone believe she was guilty. Sundar said slowly, fury trembling beneath his calm voice. You destroyed her life. Maya's eyes burned, but she said nothing. Just then, a sound came from the doorway. All three turned to see Kavya standing there, her face pale but her posture unbroken. She had followed Sundar, sensing something was wrong. Her eyes locked onto Maya, and for a moment, pain washed across her face. So, it was you all along, she whispered. You were my friend once. I trusted you. Maya's lips pressed into a thin line, her silence confirming everything. Sundar stepped closer to Kavya, his voice steady. Is what she said true? That you took the blame for her? Tears welled in Kavya's eyes, but she nodded slowly. Yes, she was powerful, connected. I was alone, already broken. I thought if I carried the burden, at least my son and I would survive. But then the fire came, and I lost everything anyway. The weight of her sacrifice, of years of silence and humiliation, hit Sundar like a storm. He turned toward Maya, his voice cold as steel. Leave, and don't come near my family again. Maya's face hardened, but she knew the battle was lost. Without another word, she turned sharply and disappeared into the night. Silence fell again, heavy and raw. Kavya stood trembling, as though waiting for Sundar's judgment. But before he could speak, Arjun ran to her and wrapped his small arms tightly around her waist. I don't care about the past, the boy whispered fiercely. When I choose, you're the one who makes me feel safe. Kavya broke into sobs, holding him as though she would never let go. Sundar's throat tightened. In that moment, he saw the truth, not the one written in documents or whispered in warnings, but the truth shining in his son's eyes. Love, trust, the ability to see beyond mistakes and scars into the heart of someone who cared. He stepped closer, his voice gentle but steady. Arjun, you don't have to choose for me, but if this is your choice, then it is mine too. Kavya looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. Are you sure, Sundar? My past is full of shadows. I cannot promise you perfection. Sundar shook his head softly. Perfection is not what heals us. Honesty does. Love does. And my son already sees both in you. For the first time in years, Sundar felt a weight lift from his chest. The grief of his wife would never vanish, but he realized something he had been blind to before moving forward did not mean betrayal. It meant carrying love into the future, not leaving it behind. Days later, Sundar watched as Arjun sat at the table with Kavya, laughing over homework, their bond already natural, already strong. For the first time, the house felt alive again, not just walls and memories, but a home. As Sundar stood in the doorway, Kavya looked up at him. Her eyes carried both sorrow and hope, scars and strength. He walked over, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, and whispered, Welcome home. Arjun grinned, his eyes shining brighter than Sundar had seen in years. See, Papa, I told you. Sometimes kids know better than grown-ups. Sundar laughed softly, ruffling his son's hair, feeling a peace he thought he had lost forever. And though the world outside would never stop demanding, never stop questioning, he knew in that moment that he had made the right choice. Not for power, not for image, not for perfection, but for family, for trust, for love, and above all, for the little boy who had taught him that sometimes the purest wisdom comes not from leaders or books, but from the heart of a child.